She knew she was going to die. And she told the world exactly who would do it. Crystal Evans wasn't just afraid. She was certain. Certain that her life was in danger. Certain that the man she once loved would kill her. Certain that no one would stop him. She begged for help. She filed police reports. She got restraining orders. She went to court. Over and over again, she tried to save her own life. But no one listened. And so, on September 13th, 2024, just one day after her divorce was finalized, she stepped out of a courthouse, thinking she was free. She was wrong. Her killer was waiting. He knew exactly where she would be. And when she reached her car, he raised his gun and pulled the trigger. Her crime? Leaving a man who refused to let her go. Her punishment? A system that failed her at every turn. Why wasn't she protected? How did the justice system allow this to happen? And why was her murderer given days to turn himself in, when he should have been arrested immediately? Was this a tragic mistake or something far worse? Welcome to True Crime Tales HQ. I sincerely thank you, my esteemed viewers, most especially my subscribers, for your endless support. At True Crime Tales HQ, where we share true told and untold crime stories. Please don't forget to subscribe if you are yet to subscribe to this channel. Before we dive deeper into Crystal's story, remember, stories like these need to be heard. They remind us why awareness and action matter. If this story moves you or you believe it can make a difference, please take a moment to like this video. It helps spread this message to more people who need to hear it. And if you've ever witnessed or experienced the warning signs of domestic violence, share your thoughts in the comments below. Your insight could help someone recognize danger in their own life, or even save a life. Most importantly, share this video with your friends, your family, and anyone who needs to understand the importance of speaking up and listening when it matters most. Together, we can build a community that supports survivors, raises awareness, and works to prevent tragedies like this from happening again. Thank you for watching. Crystal Evans, born in the Dominican Republic to parents who came to America seeking a better life. She was the kind of woman people gravitated toward. She had warmth about her, something in the way she laughed, in the way she spoke, that made you feel like you'd known her forever. She wasn't just friendly. She was genuine. The kind of person who'd stop everything to help a friend in need. The kind of mother who put her children above all else. The kind of woman who believed in second chances, even for people who didn't deserve them. She was 44 years old. A mother. A real estate agent and an entrepreneur. A woman who had built a life for herself. One filled with love, ambition, and resilience. She had fought through hardship before, fought hard. And she had always come out stronger. But the kind of fight she faced in her final days was different. This wasn't something she could outwork or outlast. It wasn't something she could fix with determination or kindness. This was a battle against something far more dangerous, something cruel, relentless, and terrifying. And she knew it. Long before her final moments, Crystal Evans had been living in fear. A fear that followed her everywhere, that crept into her thoughts at all hours of the night. She didn't just suspect that something terrible was coming, she knew, because she had been warning people, over and over again on her social media. And yet, despite all of her cries for help, despite all of the legal steps she took to protect herself, Crystal found herself standing on a path she could not escape. But before we talk about her final days, before we dive into the fear, the warnings, and the tragic failure of the justice system, let's talk about who Crystal was before any of this. Because Crystal Evans was not just a victim. She was a person. She was a lover of God, which is obvious on her social media. She was full of life, full of dreams. She loved animals, especially her cats. They weren't just pets to her. They were family. She had a soft spot for strays, for the ones that no one else wanted, because she believed everything deserved love. She adored her children. They were her entire world. The kind of mother she was, the kind who showed up to every school event, the kind who worked late nights so she could give them a better life, that tells you everything you need to know about her. And despite the darkness that would later creep into her life, Crystal was strong. Her friends would tell you. She wasn't the type to back down. She had been through struggles before, and she had fought her way out every single time. She had rebuilt herself from the ground up more than once. She knew what it was like to start over. And maybe that's why, even when the fear set and even when the warnings became clear, Crystal still had hope. Maybe she believed that this time would be like the others, that she would find a way to push through, to escape, to start fresh again. But she was wrong, because this time she wouldn't be given that chance. And the most terrifying part? She saw it coming. She told the world it was coming, but no one stopped it. And that is where this story takes a horrifying turn. At first, Tom Mallerie seemed like a dream. He was charming, attentive, and knew exactly what to say. The kind of man who could make you feel like the most important person in the world, until you weren't. Crystal Evans met Tom at a time in her life when she was ready for something real, something lasting. She has known him for 27 years. And for a while it seemed like she had found it. Their relationship started with passion, with excitement, with the kind of love that makes people believe in second chances. But love can be deceiving, because beneath the surface, behind the smiles and the promises, something darker was brewing. And it didn't take long before the cracks began to show. At first, it was small things. A comment here, a strange reaction there. The kind of behavior that's easy to brush off, to explain away. But then came the control, the jealousy, the accusations, the mood swings that turned sweet words into cold threats in a matter of seconds. Crystal told friends that Tom had a temper, one that was unpredictable, one that could turn violent. And soon, she learned that his love came with conditions. His affection was something she had to earn. His approval something that could be ripped away at any moment. And then came the betrayals. One day, Crystal discovered something that changed everything. Tom wasn't just unfaithful. He was leading a double life. She had suspected it for a while, but when she finally caught him cheating, the truth was even worse than she imagined. It wasn't with another woman. It was with a man. She posted it on her social media saying, "Tom Mallerie, go have your affairs and go with your men behind my back like you always do. Down low, brother. Didn't want to stop talking to him when I find out you are pathetic. Gay men behind my back." Crystal wasn't angry because of who he was with. She was angry because of the lies, the secrets, the way he had manipulated her, used her. And as the truth unraveled, she found out something even more devastating. Tom had been stealing from her. The business they built together, the company they co-owned, Mallerie T&K Contracting Incorporated. Tom had been funneling money out of it, using her hard-earned success to fund his affairs. Cars, gifts, lavish weekends, all paid for with money he took behind her back. That was the breaking point. Crystal was done. She wanted out. On July 31st, 2024, she took police to go retrieve her trucks she bought in her name from the company site, company they both co-owned. While 2 other trucks were missing, she posted on her social media asking followers to help her in searching. But leaving Tom Mallerie wasn't going to be that easy, because Tom wasn't the kind of man who let go. And when Crystal walked away, his love turned into obsession. The threats became constant. The stalking became relentless. She couldn't escape him. Not at work, not at home, not even in the dead of night when her phone would light up with messages she didn't want to read. She tried to fight back. She filed restraining orders. She went to the police. She documented everything. And she warned people. Her social media became her diary of fear. If anything happens to me, Tom Mallerie did it. She wasn't speaking in riddles. She wasn't being dramatic. She was stating a fact. Because she knew what was coming. She knew Tom was dangerous. She knew that if the system didn't stop him, no one would. And she was right. Because despite her restraining orders, despite the reports, despite the bruises, and the stalking, and the desperate pleas for help, Tom Mallerie was still free. Free to follow her. Free to threaten her. free to destroy her life, piece by piece. And then, he tried to bury her alive. It wasn't a metaphor. It wasn't an exaggeration. Crystal had accused Tom of literally trying to put her in a shallow grave. And yet, nothing. No arrest. No real consequences. Just more warnings. More ignored cries for help. Crystal Evans was a woman running out of time. And the terrifying part? She knew it. She had seen her own fate. And still no one stopped him. But the question remains. Why? How does a woman scream for help so loudly, so publicly, and still get silenced? What went wrong? And more importantly, why was Tom Mallerie allowed to walk free, even as he left behind a trail of evidence that should have put him behind bars? This isn't just a case of one man's obsession. This is a case of failure. A failure that cost Crystal Evans her life. And what happened next would prove just how dangerous ignoring a woman's warnings can be. Freedom. For years, it was just an idea, something Crystal Evans could only dream about. But on September 11th, 2024, that dream finally became real. The divorce was final. After years of manipulation, betrayal, and fear, she was no longer tied to Tom Mallerie. No longer forced to endure his control. No longer legally bound to the man who had made her life a waking nightmare. That day, she was hopeful. She smiled more. She talked about the future, about new beginnings. She had plans to rebuild, to move forward, to finally live without fear. Friends say she was excited, lighter than she had been in years. She had survived him, or so she thought. Because as much as Crystal wanted to believe this was the end, deep down she knew better. Tom Mallerie wasn't the kind of man who let go. And just because the marriage was over didn't mean he was finished with her. The next day, September 12th, 2024, Crystal made a call. Her voice was shaking, desperate. She wasn't paranoid. She wasn't overreacting. She knew something was wrong. Tom had been watching her, stalking her. He was always there, lurking in the shadows, waiting. She called the sheriff's office, pleading for protection. She told them she was afraid. She told them he was dangerous. She told them she knew he was going to hurt her. And what did they do? Nothing. They dismissed her, treated her like just another woman in a bad breakup. Like another voice in a system that had already failed her time and time again. Crystal hung up the phone, knowing she was on her own. And she was right. The next day, September 13th, 2024, Tom Mallerie stood in court. This wasn't his first time in front of a judge. Crystal had tried so many times to make the system see what he was. That day, he was facing domestic violence charges. A chance, finally, for the law to do what it should have done long ago. The judge had a decision to make. And they made the wrong one. A warrant was issued for Tom's arrest. But instead of taking him into custody right there, right when they had the chance, they gave him time. Time to turn himself in. Time to walk out of that courtroom a free man. Time to do what Crystal had been warning everyone about for months. That moment, that single decision, cost her everything. Because while the system gave Tom Mallerie the luxury of turning himself in on his own time, Crystal Evans was running out of hers. And within hours, she would be dead. September 13th, 2024. It was a Friday. Crystal Evans stepped out of the courthouse at exactly 12:30 p.m. The sun was high, the afternoon heat pressing down, but she barely noticed. Her mind was elsewhere, still replaying everything that had happened inside. The warrant, the judge's decision, the moment Tom walked out of that courtroom, free to do whatever he wanted. Maybe she felt it then, that gut-wrenching instinct, that deep, primal fear telling her that something wasn't right. Or maybe she was just too exhausted to feel anything at all. She pulled her bag close to her body and walked toward the parking lot. Her car was just a few steps away. Almost there, she didn't see him, but he saw her. Tom Mallerie had been waiting. Somewhere in that parking lot, hidden in plain sight, he had been watching her. waiting for the moment she'd walk out, waiting for the moment she'd be alone. And the second she reached her car, he made his move. Before Crystal could react, he pulled up beside her, rolled down his window, and raised the gun. No argument. No last words. No hesitation. Just the deafening sound of the first gunshot. The bullet tore through her chest, the impact forcing her backward. She gasped, her hands flying up instinctively, as if she could somehow stop what was already happening. But Tom wasn't done. Another shot. Then another. And another. The echoes of gunfire filled the parking lot, cutting through the normal sounds of the city. By the time it was over, Crystal was slumped against her car, blood pooling beneath her, her body still. Tom sat there for a moment staring. The woman he once controlled, the woman who had defied him, the woman who had finally broken free, was gone. But if he thought this was the end, he was wrong. Because people had seen everything. The witnesses. The panicked voices screaming for help. The flood of 911 calls reporting the gunfire. Police were on their way. And Tom Mallerie? He knew it. He hit the gas, speeding out of the courthouse parking lot, weaving through traffic as sirens blared in the distance. But he wasn't running. Not really. Because in his mind there was only one way this was going to end. If he couldn't have Crystal, if he couldn't control her in life, then he would control how his own story ended. At least, that's what he thought. Somewhere along the highway, as the flashing lights closed in, Tom raised the gun to his own head. One last act of control. One final escape. He pulled the trigger. But fate had other plans. Because, unlike Crystal, Tom Mallerie survived. The news spread fast. By nightfall, Crystal Evans' name was everywhere. The headlines, the social media posts, the candlelit vigils. Another woman murdered by the man she had begged the system to protect her from. Another name added to a growing list of victims who saw their fate coming, who screamed for help, only to be ignored. For Crystal's family, the pain was unbearable. Her daughter, Precious Evans, was the first to speak out. She had lost her mother, her rock, her best friend. And now, she was left with only questions. Questions that no one in power seemed willing to answer. How many reports had Crystal filed? How many times had she called the police? How many warnings had she given? Clear, undeniable warnings that named Tom Mallerie as her future killer. And yet, nothing had been done. Not when he stalked her. Not when he violated the restraining order. Not even when she stood in a courtroom less than an hour before her murder, watching a judge issue a warrant, only to let Tom walk free. For Precious, grief quickly turned into anger. And she wasn't alone. The outrage spread like wildfire. Thousands of people shared Crystal's story, posting screenshots of her final warnings. The desperate messages where she told the world exactly what was going to happen. If anything happens to me, Tom Mallerie did it. Those words, written days before her murder, became a rallying cry. And soon, people weren't just talking about Crystal. They were talking about the system that failed her. The system that fails so many victims of domestic violence. Within days, vigils were being held across the state. Hundreds gathered outside the courthouse, where she was killed. Candles lit the steps. People held signs demanding change. Survivors came forward, sharing their own horror stories. Stories that sounded eerily similar to Crystal's. Stories of being ignored. Of being dismissed. Of watching their abusers walk free, no matter how many times they begged for help. And then, just as public pressure was reaching its peak, the sheriff's office released a statement. They denied any wrongdoing. According to them, Crystal had never requested an escort from the courthouse that day. They claimed she never expressed immediate fear for her life. And the judge? The one who allowed Tom Mallerie to turn himself in later, instead of taking him into custody on the spot. He refused to comment. To the public, it felt like a slap in the face. Because how much more proof did Crystal need to provide? How many more times did she have to say she was in danger? How many more victims would have to die before someone in power actually listened? The outrage only grew louder. People flooded the sheriff's office with calls. Protesters lined the streets, demanding answers. And Precious Evans, still grieving, still trying to make sense of her mother's brutal murder, made a promise. She would not let her mother's story be forgotten. She would not let the system sweep this under the rug. Crystal Evans spent her final days fighting for her own life. Now it was time for someone to fight for her. But would it be enough? Would her murder finally be the wake-up call that forced the system to change? Or, like so many others before her, would Crystal's name eventually become just another statistic? The world was watching. And this time, silence would not be an option. The numbers don't lie. Every year, thousands of women are murdered by their partners. Not strangers. Not random criminals in the night. The men who once told them, "I love you." The men they once trusted. And for women like Crystal Evans, the ones who try to escape, the danger doesn't disappear. It escalates. Because leaving isn't the end. For many, it's the most dangerous part. Studies show that a woman is most likely to be killed in the weeks after leaving an abusive partner. That moment, the moment she finally breaks free, isn't when she's safest. It's when she's at greatest risk. Crystal Evans knew that. She had seen the statistics. She had lived in fear of what Tom Mallerie was capable of. She had done everything she was supposed to do. She got a restraining order. She reported him to the police. She even stood in court, hoping the legal system would step in before it was too late. But it wasn't enough, because time and time again, the same mistake is made. A restraining order isn't a shield. A police report isn't a guarantee of safety. And when the system fails to take immediate action, it doesn't just fail. It leaves the door open for the worst possible outcome. That's exactly what happened to Crystal. Let's break it down. Tom Mallerie wasn't just accused of domestic violence. He had a history of abuse, a paper trail of threats, a series of escalating behaviors, each one more dangerous than the last. When Crystal told the police he was stalking her, what did they do? Nothing. When she reported that he violated his restraining order, what happened? Nothing. And when a judge finally issued a warrant for his arrest, after she stood in court, terrified for her life, what did they do? They let him go. They let him go. Instead of arresting him on the spot, instead of removing the immediate threat, they allowed him to turn himself in later. As if he were a man accused of a simple misdemeanor. As if he hadn't spent the last several months proving, over and over again, that he was capable of the worst. And Crystal, the woman who had done everything right, she left that courthouse alone. No police escort. No protection. Not even a second thought from the people who were supposed to keep her safe. And just minutes later, she was dead. So the question is, what should have been done differently? How many red flags had to be ignored before someone finally saw the truth? Should Tom Mallerie have been arrested immediately? Absolutely. Should Crystal have been granted police protection when she asked for it? Without a doubt. But the real issue? The real failure? It wasn't just about Crystal. It was about a system that consistently underestimates the danger of domestic violence. A system that hands out restraining orders like band-aids, but doesn't enforce them. A system that waits until the worst happens, until another woman is murdered before it asks, could we have done more? But by then it's always too late. So here's the real question. If the justice system isn't protecting women like Crystal, who is? And more importantly, how many more will die before something finally changes? Crystal Evans didn't die because she made the wrong choices. She didn't die because she stayed. She died because she left. Because the very system designed to protect her let her down. Now, we're left with a question. A question that should haunt everyone who hears this story. Who is responsible for Crystal Evans' death? Is it Tom Mallerie, the man who pulled the trigger? Or is it the police who ignored her desperate calls for help? The judge who let her abuser walk free on a technicality. The system, which time and time again chooses to wait until a woman is murdered before taking action? And if this could happen to Crystal, how many others are living this same nightmare right now? How many women are watching this, knowing they could be next? Maybe you've been there. Maybe someone you love has. Maybe you've heard the words, "You're overreacting," or "We can't do anything until he actually does something." Maybe you filed a restraining order and wondered if it was just another piece of paper. Maybe you've been in Crystal's shoes, begging for someone to listen before it's too late. And maybe you know how it feels to realize that the people who are supposed to protect you won't. If you've ever experienced something like this, or if you know someone who has, share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the judge should have arrested Tom on the spot? Do you believe Crystal's murder could have been prevented? And most importantly, what do you think needs to change to stop this from happening again? Let's talk about it. Because if nothing changes, how many more Crystals will there be? So many questions demanding answers. Share your thought in the comment section. If you have similar experience or known anyone with similar, please share so others can learn. Crystal's story is tragic, but it's not unique. Too many victims cry out for help, only to be ignored until it's too late. If you believe stories like Crystal's deserve to be heard, hit the like button, subscribe, and share this video. The more people see it, the more awareness we can spread about the failures in the system and the lives that could still be saved. And don't forget, our next case is so shocking it changed the law forever. You won't want to miss it.